Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Hey y'all, I'm Frank King, and welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and yes, hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Palm Springs, California. Every February, they have a huge architecture and design festival called Modernism Week. A dazzling 10-day spectacle of architecture, martinis, lectures, art, architecture movies, parties, tours, exhibits, and the occasional plastic surgery gone awry. Our own George Smart was there talking poolside with keynote speakers, authors, and special guests during the entire week of Modernism Week. It's a tough job, but hey, I was busy, so somebody else had to do it. Support for US Modernist Radio comes from Realtor Angela Roll, your highly trained special agent for bringing modernist design expertise to buyers and sellers. You can reach Angela at angelaroll.com, that's roll, R-O-E-H-L, or give her a ring at 919-995-0550. Today, George welcomes author, architect, and Quincy Jones expert, the architect, not the musician, Cory Buckner. And later on, producer Leo Zahn. He drops by to talk about his new documentary on Frank Sinatra. Fly me to the moon. Let me... Okay, I'll stop. Let's go to Palm Springs.
This is George Smart with US Modernist Radio, and we are poolside during Modernism Week at the Hyatt Palm Springs. My guest is Cory Buckner. She is an architect, artist, and author from L.A. She's author of many books, including one of my favorites, A. Quincy Jones, also The Lyman House, and Crestwood Hills, the Chronicle of a Modern Utopia. Los Angeles Magazine named Cory as one of the 6 women who changed the face of L.A. architecture. She is the recipient of the 2002 Los Angeles Conservancy Award, and her firm, aptly named Cory Buckner Architect, specializes in modernist design for clients such as Courtney Cox and David Arquette. Welcome, Cory.
Thank you.
You're here this week to talk about Quincy Jones, an important modernist architect whose buildings you've worked to save. How often do people get Quincy Jones the musician and Quincy Jones the architect confused?
Well, less often now, but when I was writing the book, I went over to Warner Brothers Studios, which Jones did design, and this was right after 9/11. And I walked in explaining I was writing a book on A. Quincy Jones. Could I possibly see the building? The security officer said, "Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's not possible. And besides, he didn't record at the studio." So I could have explained further, but I just gave up at that point.
Quincy Jones was an important architect in his time. He was well known. And I understand he's getting sort of a big bump lately because celebrities are buying his homes and flipping them. And
well, that's true. He did do several large luxury homes, which people have bought and restored and turned around, and that's true. There is a resurgence of his popularity. Much more right after I wrote the book. A little bit less now. A lot of the houses are privately owned, and they're holding on to them as well. But yes, he deserves all the attention he's getting.
Tell us about Quincy Jones. How did he get started, and how did he come to prominence in Los Angeles?
He moved to L.A. after graduating from the University of Washington in Seattle and started working for a couple firms. He searched out modernist architects and worked for Burton Schutt. He actually worked for Paul Williams as well for a couple years. He then went into the service, and he was very determined to open his own office. So the first day that he was released from service, he opened his office in his own home in Laurel Canyon and started his own practice. He had his first client the first day he opened the house. And he stayed busy with a variety of work, commercial, residential, institutional, until he died in 1979. He was consistently a modernist architect. He never wavered from that position. All of his work is very sensitive to the structural design. Each project he took and considered very carefully the user, the site, and also the structural system. he was interested in sort of pushing the limits, and he did push limits with building departments, getting them to approve things they would not normally do so as far as the structural elements.
Was that because the engineering was just too way out for these planners?
Yeah, I think so, that they hadn't thought of these different systems themselves, hadn't calculated if they would actually work. Jones did that and walked them through it, and he was able to get several things approved that would not normally have been so. And the fact that he was very interested in the user, the projects were very individual in that sense. So when I first started working on the book, which is probably 1995, probably about 95, he was not very well known because he doesn't have a distinctive style like Neutra or Schindler. It is more user-oriented and specific to the program and the client's wishes. So both with Williams and Jones, this was pretty much the case, that because they cared more about solving the problem than making a name for themselves as far as a stamped style, their work was a little bit less known.
Well, isn't it true that architects always say that about each other? I mean, the ones that are more successful, they've sold out, and the other ones are more client-centered, and, there's a lot of that going on, too.
Yes, that's true. Today as well. My work is more client-centered, so my hackles are raised whenever I see egoist architects just making it big.
Now, 20 years ago or so, you were very much involved in helping preserve and save Crestwood Hills. Tell us about that community and what you had to go through with various boards to get that to go.
Yeah, that is an interesting story. My husband and I, Nick Roberts, he was an architect. He passed away about 5 years ago. We designed and built a house in Malibu, and it burned in one of the Malibu brush fires. So we found out, much to our joy, that we had twice the insurance we thought we had. I had done a couple projects in Crestwood Hills on the original houses, so I was very intrigued with that area. And it didn't make any sense to put all that money back into a house way out in the sticks in Malibu. So we looked around for a house to purchase, and we did find one of the original houses on Rochdale Lane. Loved the very simple gable roof design. Bought that and restored it. At that point, I actually met Elaine Jones and started to work on the book on A. Quincy Jones.
That was his wife,
mm-hmm.
Yes.
And an archivist. She never threw away a piece of paper, so there's an extensive archive at the UCLA Research Library. But as we got settled into the community, we started seeing that these houses were not being respected. They were either being remodeled beyond recognition or torn down.
The Priscilla Presley syndrome.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or they're being torn down right and left by developers because of the land value was greater than the house value, really, or the same, I should say. So we were pretty upset about that. So we contacted all the people that were living in the original houses. We contacted the city of LA to see if we could get an HPOZ, Historical Preservation Overlay Zone, and held a meeting.
That sounds like a new toy to me that you get at Christmas. I'd like an HPOZ, please.
Yes, I wish they were passing them out like toys. So we had a meeting, and much to our shock, nobody was interested. They were all concerned. And mind you, these were old-timers. These were people who had either been original members or had been in the houses many, many years. They were concerned about the property value and as far as leaving it for their heirs, whether this would be a mistake.
Right.
So eventually we had we had 5 people interested, a lot that actually hadn't attended the meeting, but they were interested in having their houses declared historic. So I took in a handful of those houses to the Cultural Heritage Commission. And it was clear they were not interested in modern architecture at all, which sounds shocking now. I mean, this is back in 98, I think is when I...
Well, that's when you could, pick up some of these things for a couple $100,000.
Exactly.
And,
yeah. And they didn't see the value in anything 50 years old. So I had to pull out the big guns. And I had letters from Julius Schulman, letters from Elaine Jones, and several other people. And then, much to my surprise, somebody was sort of working behind the scenes in the councilman's office. And when they came out to do the tour, we looked at the 5 different houses. And the chair of the commission pulled me aside and said, I think we're only going to declare one. We'll declare your house. And just to backtrack a little, so that is when I actually started to pull out the big guns, and with the letters from Julius Schulman and Elaine Jones. Working behind scenes, the councilman did pull some strings, and in the end, during the hearing, they decided to declare 4 out of the 5. And then that was really wonderful because all of a sudden we could publicize this in the papers, magazines, and the word got out that these houses were actually precious. So every 2 years I'd go in with another 5. And eventually I got 15 declared historic monument. And now different owners have come in and done it themselves. So we have 19 declared out of the existing 30 that exist. So fairly proud of that effort. It really did save the neighborhood. As I said earlier, primarily because of publicity, getting the word out. These are precious.
Can people drive through the neighborhood and see the houses from the street?
Yes, you can. Unfortunately, a lot of people are now building these fences, which are a little bit too high, including one on one of my projects, which I really fought with the owner not to do, but he did. They can drive through. Certainly, Rochdale Lane has a lot of the original houses. Deerbrook Lane as well. And Deerbrook, the houses are without fences, so you can see a lot of the originals.
Okay.
As well as Stonehill Lane.
I wanted to ask you about a couple of houses specifically that I think you've been involved with. The Hinsdale house on Tiger Tail,
yes,
which was endangered in 2014. What happened to it?
Well, that's a sad story, unfortunately. We got word that a developer had bought that house, and it was one of the originals. It's the first house as you go up Tiger Tail, so it's sort of a pivot point for the neighborhood. You see the house, and anyway, I called people I know down at the Cultural Heritage Commission, and they said, well, if you can get this application in 3 days, Friday, this was Wednesday, we can consider this at our next meeting. So I did. I had just finished the book. I had all of the images I needed, all the information, so I was able to get the application together. At the hearing, they voted to consider it, which meant that they would go out on a tour to see the house. And the day of the tour, they asked if I would come along to explain everything to them, which I was happy to do. Unfortunately, the owner, the developer, had his attorney there, and they would not let me on the property. So I was not able to explain to the commissioners how easy it would be to restore that house back to the original condition. When they met again to do the final vote on declaring it historic monument, they voted 1 in favor, 4 against. The one voting for it was an architect on the commission. She saw the value of it. The other said, well, you already have models of this type, the 108, declared, so we didn't see the value in that. And it was really short-sighted. Being the first house that you see in the neighborhood, now what you see is what looks like a bank building, this 2-story box with, I think it has a granite facade. It's just really out of context. And
so I take it the whole house was destroyed in favor
yes,
of
they
this,
tore it down immediately.
Okay.
Immediately. And, very sad story.
Now, I saw just recently being here in February of 2018, that the Nina Anderton house on Sorbonne has gone on the market. Were you aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
Yes, that just happened.
Interesting. She was a great client for Jones. He designed on Morago condominiums. I guess they were apartment buildings then, but they're condominiums now. Very interesting buildings. And then her own house, but no, I was not aware of that.
And what about Jones' own house? How long did his widow live there after he passed away?
Until she passed away, and I think that was probably about 5 years ago now.
Okay.
Fortunately, the Annenberg Foundation purchased the house. I mean, the whole preservation community was up in arms. We were sure that would be torn down. It's such a prime commercial area right next to Century City. But the Annenbergs have purchased it and turned it into a study center, research center. I don't think it's open to the public. They've had people stay there to do research for a year, I believe.
Residency type program?
Residency, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do they still do that at the Neutra house in Silver Lake where people live there?
Uh-huh.
You did the Ben Adler house for
Yes.
Courtney Cox and David Arquette.
Right.
Are they still there?
No, they divorced. Arquette stayed in the house, and I believe it was recently sold.
Okay.
I know it was on the market.
I looked it up, and it was sold to some place called I Like Big Butts LLC.
Ooh. Well, there you go.
I wasn't quite sure who that was. I was wondering if you knew.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't.
Okay. Well, all of you listeners out there, if you know who I Like Big Butts LLC is, please let us know, and I will share that with Cory. What's the next wave of architecture that's going to be meaningful and poignant like modernism is now? I mean, we're we're worshiping architects that, for the most part, are long gone and did their primary work between the 50s, 60s, and 70s. What do you see on the horizon that we're going to be having conferences about in 2090?
Well, I would guess, certainly brutalism is biting the dust right and left. That was a very interesting era, and there are structures that really should be preserved. My daughter, Bryony Roberts, actually is a preservationist architect. She does a very different kind of preservation than I do. It's much more repurposing. She teaches at Columbia and at the Oslo School of Design, and they're really concentrating on brutalist architecture, saving that if it's possible. I think that that's probably the next real hot spot. And then also just high tech, which is very popular in the late 60s, 70s. A lot of those structures, steel structures, things that sort of moved away from the mid-century sensibility into more high-tech technological advancement, those could possibly be endangered.
Now, I'm not an architect or preservationist, but it seems to me like it would be pretty straightforward to save a brutalist building if it's just mostly made of concrete. Is that right, or are there special problems that those kinds of buildings have?
Well, it's rare. It also depends on where they are. I mean, the elements can get to concrete and the rebar. But for the most part, it's because the population, the people, don't appreciate it. They find them ugly, and they're tearing them down. I forget where I was in Europe. It was in London. They were tearing down a very large complex, only because they were going to replace it with, modern-day condominiums and something that these structures could have been repurposed. There was no reason to tear down something as substantially, structurally significant as the structure I saw.
In Australia, they've been working to save the Sirius building, which is a big brutalist hulk that, people either love or hate, and that seems to come out even more with concrete buildings and even just regular modernist buildings.
Exactly, it does.
Buildings by Paul Rudolph, for instance, are very much hated by a number of people.
That's true. And much loved by a smaller number who are trying to pull the forces to save them.
What do you enjoy most about coming out to Modernism Week?
Oh, gosh. Well, other than just seeing the mountains, but running into people that I haven't seen for a couple of years. I usually come back every 2 years to give a lecture. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, certainly the parties are great fun. And just to see the kind of love for this period, this modernist period, and how it has grown incredibly over the last, 10 years or so.
Yeah.
So many people interested in it.
It's no longer a cult, it's a movement.
No, exactly, which is thrilling to see.
It's mainstream now.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Cory, for coming by and talking with me.
Thank you so much.
Have a great time during Modernism Week.
Thank you.
Stay with us. There's more to come from US Modernist Radio at Modernism Week.
Hi, this is George Smart with US Modernist Radio, and we're here at our Western headquarters, the Hotel Skylark in Palm Springs, California, during Modernism Week, where my guest is Leo Zahn, and he just did a great film called Sinatra in Palm Springs, The Place He Called Home, a documentary about Frank Sinatra and his life here in the Valley, a place he went to escape from the LA scene and some of his other commitments. So, Leo, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
How did you get into this? I understand you're a relatively new entrant into Palm Springs?
By Palm Springs standards, I'm a total outsider because I've only come here 7 years ago. You need to be here 30 years to really be taken seriously.
That's how you get your green card.
Yes, that's right. So I'm a baby boomer. When I grew up, I was not a Sinatra fan. I listened to rock and roll like all my friends.
Sure.
Of course. So this film is not because I have a passion for his music. It's because moving here, I heard all these people talk about Sinatra as if he was their best friend or drinking buddy or, everybody has a Sinatra story here. Detroit is a company town for the motor industry.
Sure.
Hollywood is the company town for the film industry. Palm Springs is the company town for Sinatra, at least regarding the classic period of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now it's more known for the Coachella music festival.
Right.
Or Modernism Week. But up until the 90s, when he moved back to Beverly Hills, it was really Sinatra's town and Bob Hope's town.
And Bob Hope, okay, of course.
So anyway, I heard stories. You go to a bar and there's some barfly in her 80s. Oh, yeah, I knew Frank. And you hear these stories all the time. I thought, well, it could be interesting to make a movie about those people. It'd be an interesting, quirky little film. But then it took on another dimension when I met Barbara Sinatra's best friend, Nelda, who herself is an icon of mid-century modern.
She's famous from the poolside gossip photo at the Kaufman
right.
House.
She lived in the Kaufman House when she moved here in '64. And the famous Slim Aaron's 1971 poolside gossip photo was shot with her in the picture, yes. And she's I call her Palm Springs royalty. If there is royalty, she's part of it.
Well, she's getting a star, I understand.
That's correct.
This week.
On Thursday.
On the Walk of Fame.
Right. And she connected me with a lot of people who are up because, like I said, I'm an outsider. I would have never otherwise been able to get. Because you call these people and say, who are you?
Right.
But when she calls them and says, you need to do the interview, they do.
How was Frank Sinatra's reputation here in Palm Springs different than in L.A.?
Much, much different, because this was not just a getaway. It was his hometown. This is where his primary home was. Most people don't know that.
I didn't know that.
Yes. It's his primary home. Beverly Hills was just for local. He had a place in Malibu as well. He liked to be at the ocean in the summer. But he also liked the heat. He was a desert rat, So, when you're from Hoboken, I think it's in your genes to love the desert heat.
Yeah.
So, no, this was his hometown. He cared about this town, unlike Los Angeles, which was company town for the music and film business. He was, in Palm Springs, the kind of person that, what's so astonishing to find out, he would read the Desert Sun newspaper every morning and see if anybody needed any help. Let's say an old lady's mobile home burned down. He would send that person a check anonymously. He did this kind of thing all the time. He helped people who were in need anonymously. And he only did that here in Palm Springs.
He didn't do it in L.A.?
No.
Now,
of course, he made charitable contributions and he raised money for all kinds of causes. And that's an official kind of charity work. But this anonymous thing, that's very much Palm Springs, because he considered this his town. Very different from Bob Hope.
Tell me about Bob Hope. How was that different?
Well, as Bruce Fessier, who is a renowned reporter from the Desert Sun, tells us in the film, when Bob Hope was in his 90s, Bruce asked him, what are you going to do with your tournament? Bob had a tournament here for many, many years.
The golf tournament, right?
Yeah. And Bob told him, well, I think I'm going to sell it. And Bruce thought to himself, you're going to sell your name? Frank Sinatra would have never done that. When you look at the Bob Hope house on top of that mountain.
The John Lautner.
Yeah, which he called when the designer showed it to him. Now I know what it's going to look like when Martians land in Burbank.
Right.
When you look at that compared to the Sinatra house, not the Twin Palms, but the compound where he lived in Rancho Mirage for 40 years. These are very simple homes. They're just clustered in a kind of a village. But it's a very simple lifestyle. He never had any lavish homes. That Bob Hope house says a lot about Bob Hope. No, not that I'm against Bob Hope. I love Bob Hope. Everybody loves Bob Hope. But it was a very different personality.
Well, Bob Hope, I understand, was a very shrewd real estate investor, too. Owned tons of property. He bought as early as the 40s, maybe?
In fact, I lived in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles most of my life, and Bob Hope owned most of that.
Okay.
He bought it after the war for nothing, and he became a gazillionaire.
Through real estate?
Yes.
Yeah, not just from performing. But...
Oh, no. And Bob Hope always had a business going. He was always out there promoting himself. He was big in radio, television, movies, real estate, everything.
Well, let's get back to Sinatra. Sinatra built his famous 47 Twin Palms estate, and that was when he was with Ava Gardner?
Okay, now this is the most interesting part of the story I tell in the movie, because there's a lot of confusion about that. See, that house was built in record time because he wanted it ready for the Christmas party in 1947. he was married to Nancy Sr. at the time, and I think he had all 3 kids. No, Tina's born in 48. No, actually, he had Nancy and Frank Jr. at that point. And, of course, he had an affair with Eva, which became a public scandal at the time. You know, a Catholic family.
Sure.
What very few people know is what's in my film. Stuart Williams' daughter-in-law, Sidney Williams, is interviewed in my film. She's a renowned architecture historian.
She's got a star on the Walk of Fame, too.
That's right. She used to run the architecture museum here. She told me that Stu Williams, the architect of that house, enjoyed working with Ava Gardner during the design and construction phase of that house. That gives us a historical marker that in 1947, Ava was very much involved with Frank's personal life here in Palm Springs. You know, they didn't get married until 1951.
Right.
So she was involved in that. And of course, there's the famous crack in the sink.
Where they were throwing things.
Where supposedly he was tossing a bottle of champagne across the room and it hit the sink. That's a jumping off point for me in the film to tell a story about their fights and their volatile love life.
And when they parted, where did Ava go next?
Well, Ava lived in Los Angeles, but see what happens with Sinatra, Frank, when she left him, that's basically what happened. That house, I mean, it's a very important house for many reasons. It's for architectural reasons, as a jewel of early mid-century modern. Also the fact that it was forgotten for decades as Sinatra's first home.
Right.
But it was also the stage of these incredible fights that Sinatra had with Ava. And after she left him, of course there was the scandal and the paparazzi were after him constantly. He basically was hiding out in Jimmy Van Heusen's house in Rancho Mirage, 10 miles east. And at that time, there was no city of Rancho Mirage, but it was called Rancho Mirage as a living area. And there was Thunderbird Country Club, 1951, and then Thunderbird Heights. And Jimmy Van Heusen had a house there. He was his best friend. That's where he was hiding, where Frank Sinatra was hiding from the press. And then he decided to buy a home that was initially designed by William Cody.
Okay.
Adjacent to the new Tamarisk Country Club. But it wasn't designed for Sinatra. It was a home designed for somebody else who never moved into it. Sinatra bought it, then briefly put it on the market, had second thoughts and kept it. And that was the beginning nucleus of what we call the compound, which he would expand tremendously over the years. And it became this huge
So did
estate.
Ava Gardner stay in the E. Stuart Williams house?
There's different stories about that. Supposedly, one source told me that she stayed there for a while, but I think because Melissa Ritchie, who's a researcher about history of Palm Springs and Rancho Mirage, she wrote an interesting article that you can Google about this. She found records in Desert Sun. All the Desert Sun papers are now scanned and available in archives created by the University of California, Riverside. There was a sale of that house. I have to look it up again. I think 55. She filed for divorce 54. Maybe right after that, the house was sold. Frank wanted to get out of there. He wanted to forget all the bad stuff. He was too exposed at that house. That's why he moved east, ended up in Rancho Mirage.
Okay. Ava Gardner was from my home state, North Carolina.
Wow.
She grew up in Smithfield, a little tobacco town. There's a museum down there now, the Ava Gardner Museum.
I've heard about that. I would love to see that, yes.
You should come by and visit.
Yes. Everybody's fascinated with Ava Gardner. What a life. Amazing. And I was interviewed on the radio here the other day, and they said, well, it's just incredible that after Frank, she went with Mickey Rooney. I said, no, it's the other way around. Mickey Rooney was her first husband when she was 19 years old. And the band leader, Artie Shaw, was her second. Frank was her third and last.
As you pulled together this film, did you get to talk to Tina Sinatra?
No. And there's no Nancy Sinatra either, and I get that question often. For various reasons of confidentiality, I cannot talk about that.
Okay.
They're both not in the film.
Did they just not want to be in the film?
I cannot get into that.
I cannot say. You're going to do a Stormy Daniels on me here.
Maybe at 2 a.m. at a bar after my 5th cocktail, I'll tell you the story.
That's a new expression now, is doing a Stormy.
Right. Barbara Sinatra's in the film.
Okay.
That's significant.
Yes.
It's the last interview I did, or that she did. December 2016. I think she passed away in August 2017. That was quite a coup, and I got it because of Nelda Linsk. I also have an interview with Mal Haber. You know who he is, right?
Sure.
His last interview as well. May 2016. He passed away in September. People now tell me, stop interviewing people. They're dying on you, so don't do that anymore.
Back in North Carolina, we go around the state interviewing very senior architects.
Yes.
It's often the last interview that they give, and we ask them about their careers and get an oral history of what's been going on with them.
Yeah.
And about half of those people have passed away since we started. So I understand where you're coming from there. The joke is, if George Smart's coming around, check your insurance.
I like that. Yes.
How will you get this film out to fans of Sinatra and his music and others who appreciate him for his career?
Well, just to be sure everybody understands, it's not a film about his music. There's only 3 short clips of his actual singing in the film. And it's not a biography. It's specifically about Palm Springs. It probably will run locally in the local movie theater here pretty soon on a regular basis. And I've gotten on our Facebook page, we have a Facebook page, Sinatra in Palm Springs, thousands of requests already from people across the country. Where can we buy the DVD? We want to get the poster, all that stuff. Right now, we're in the very early stages. The film was shown for the first time in Santa Fe at the Film Festival 2 weeks ago. Tomorrow is the official world premiere here in Palm Springs. Then there's another screening on the 25th. Then it'll be shown at the Pasadena Film Festival.
Okay.
At the Phoenix Film Festival. So it's going to roll through festivals, not only in the United States, but also in Europe, Milan, Berlin. So that's what you got to do for a year, build up a lot of publicity and awareness.
And then is that when you burst out with the DVD and Blu-ray versions?
Then it depends on the distribution deal that we make. If Netflix wants to have it, they may have the DVD rights, or, it depends on the deal. You don't want to give away any rights until you have a really good deal that's an overall deal. So we have to wait. I don't think there will be a DVD or Blu-ray until September, October at the earliest.
Okay. So fans, you're going to have to wait.
You're going to have to wait.
Get this.
Or go to a festival. We have SinatraPalmSprings.com, a little plug, which is the official website. And, of course, on Facebook, there's always updates what's going on.
Well, Leo, thank you for stopping by. And
thanks for having me.
I hope your film does really well.
Thank you, George.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
As always, thanks for listening. Hey, want to go to Modernism Week in Palm Springs next year and hang out with the cool kids? Plus George Smart? Send an email to george@ncmodernist.org. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses. You can reach her at 919-995-0550. Okay, Tomas, take us out.
Visit USModernist.org to listen to previous shows and discover our massive mid-century modernist archives. US Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton, not a real name, researches guests from a secret underground bunker very close to Whole Foods. US Modernist Radio is a production of Triangle Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational organization for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. Stay tuned for more shows from Modernism Week on US Modernist Radio.